As Pastor Greg said, I'm Taisha McWilliams, and I am a short-term recruiter for Young Adults in Global Mission, which is an ELCA ministry. And I spent my last year in South Africa, so that will give you a little context for what I'm speaking about today. And the reading today comes from 1 Samuel chapter 3, verses 1 through 10. Now the boy Samuel was ministering to the Lord under Eli. The word of the Lord was rare in those days. Visions were not widespread. At that time, Eli, whose eyesight had begun to grow dim so that he could not see, was lying down in his room. The lamp of the Lord had not yet gone out, and Samuel was lying down in the temple of the Lord, where the ark of God was. Then the Lord called, "Samuel, Samuel," and he said, "Here I am," and ran to Eli and said, "Here I am, for you called me." But he said, "I did not call. Lie down again." So he went and lay down. The Lord called again, "Samuel." Samuel got up and went to Eli and said, "Here I am, for you called me." But he said, "I did not call, my son. Lie down again." Now Samuel did not yet know the Lord, and the word of the Lord had not yet been revealed to him. The Lord called Samuel again, a third time, and he got up and went to Eli and said, "Here I am, for you called me." Then Eli perceived that the Lord was calling the boy. Therefore Eli said to Samuel, "Go, lie down, and if he calls you, you shall say, 'Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening.'" So Samuel went and lied down in his place. Now the Lord came and stood there, calling as before, "Samuel, Samuel." And Samuel said, "Speak, for your servant is listening." Tainja, Taisha, Taisia, Teja, Umlungu, and Tombazan. Yes, my name's kind of difficult to start out with, but I went by all of those names this past year living in South Africa. At times, people didn't know my name, and as a matter of fact, I didn't even know my name. I didn't know who I was, as I was now this person without a past, besides being from America. And I didn't know what I was doing in many circumstances, like being told to make food at the preschool and making this corn porridge and not being able to get the clumps out because I didn't know the tricks. I could sit there for hours and nothing would get those clumps out. And during those times of confusion, I didn't feel okay. I felt lost. But when I was able to look back and reflect, I realized it was okay, because even if I didn't know who I was in the world, God did. And along with helping out at the preschool, I worked with a local woman named Kanye Sile, assisting people with physical disabilities in the rural surrounding areas where we lived. And most Zulu names have meanings, and Kanye Sile means bringing the light. And every time we drove to a new home to visit, a door was opened. My eyes were opened, and my heart and my mind were being formed constantly and being molded into something new than they ever were before. And I learned more about life than I could ever have imagined. A little light was shed on the struggles people face in the area and the humanity that binds us all together. I'd like to share a short story from one of our visits that lives strongly in my memory. So in the heat of midday, Kanye, which is short for Kanye Sile, and Mr. Mayaba, the driver, and I pull into a worn-down kraal, which is the houses and buildings of a family, and we went to the farthest stop for our last house visit, and a man shouted and came from the back, and he was grasping for assistance, and I didn't know exactly what was going on, but he was blind and wasting away, and the house reeked of human decay. Leftovers were strewn over the table and on the floor, and it was a haven for flies. But still, Kanye entered, took this man's hand, guided him to a chair, and they talked and talked. but I couldn't understand what was being said because of my limited Zulu. And so after the conversation was over and we hopped back into the 4x4 to leave, I asked her what this man's story was. And she told me he had been attacked and his eyes were knifed out. He was suffering from tuberculosis. He had just found out his status. Yes, he was HIV positive from an out-of-town girlfriend. These are not easy things to live with, any of them, and all of them put together seems quite impossible. But Kanye was trained in HIV and AIDS counseling, and she told him to take his meds day and night, put them where he could find them under his pillow and certain places, and that he could keep living his life as usual if he took his medication. She told him his life was not over and that he still had life to live. She was bringing the light to him and to all her patients. She brought hope. Now, Kanye could not pronounce my name very well, so it sounded like Taisha, which is close to a shortened name for Tenjiwe in South Africa. And that's how I got my Zulu name. It was close to my mispronounced English name. However, what struck me most about my Zulu name was its meaning. It was trusted. I had the privilege of becoming a trusted person throughout my community and my year there. A person she could share her work and her passions with, and her patients could share their lives with. And I guess I was called by a new name to share life with these people in this new context. And so let's think back to the scripture again. Let me read the end. Now the Lord came and stood there calling as before, Samuel, Samuel. And Samuel said, speak, for your servant is listening. God called Samuel by his name, but Samuel didn't know it was him until he had help from Eli. In life, we are called to many things. Some things we like, some things we don't. Some things we understand, some things we don't, some things close to home, some things far away. But God is constantly calling us, and always by name. However, he calls us by our true name, child of God, for he knows us inside and out. And all we can do is be faithful and say, speak, for your servant is listening, because God calls us on purpose for a purpose, to be transformed and to transform. So my prayer today is that we all listen to the calls that God puts on our hearts. They will most likely not start with your name, whether it has a cool meaning or not, being shouted in the middle of the night directly from God, but let us listen, whatever those callings may be, and let us be willing to be quiet and listen while God speaks. Thank you.